Number 10. An accident. The story of a Canadian man named Mackenzie Peddle is nothing short of miraculous. Mackenzie was driving home after working a long shift when out of nowhere, an axe literally came flying through his windshield like something out of a horror movie and hit him right in the face. This is 100% true and was reported on by the CBC. Mackenzie remembered the axe coming through his window, he blacked out when it hit him, and he woke up about an hour later with his truck on the side of the road with a woman tapping on his window. When Mackenzie woke up, his head was covered in blood. He could hardly remember what happened and he was extremely disoriented. But the craziest part is that he had no idea where the axe had come from. It was sitting on the passenger seat beside him. There was blood everywhere, but he had no idea how the axe had gotten through his window in the first place. And even though the local police launched an investigation, nothing was ever found out about the mysterious axe. And believe it or not, this was not the first time Mackenzie walked away from a near-death experience because of something strange smashing through his windshield. Just 10 years earlier, while driving down the highway, a length of rebar had become detached from somebody's truck, bounced off the highway, and smashed straight through his window, sailing over his shoulder and then spearing the back seat like some kind of medieval javelin. Mackenzie walked away with only a few minor scratches, surviving impalement by mere inches. Number 9. Saved by the coin. A Belgian soldier fighting during World War I survived being shot thanks to a few coins that he had in his pocket. The soldier's name was Optatius Bissens, and it would be his great-grandson Vincent that would find the coins over 100 years later and retell his great-grandfather's amazing story. It was during a scouting mission in 1914 when Optatius was shot in the chest, but he lived to tell the tale. Ironically, the coins that he had actually gave away his position because they'd been clinking together in his breast pocket. One of the enemy soldiers heard the coins, they turned and fired, and Optatius went down. Then when the German soldier who shot him came over and kicked Optatius in the head, he pretended like he was dead. He waited until the coast was clear and then crawled to safety. Upon closer inspection later, he saw the bullet had struck the stack of coins in his pocket and ricocheted away, thereby saving his life. This lucky soldier would go on to live until the 1950s, when he eventually died of heart disease. And according to what his great-grandson Vincent told CNN, he only discovered the story recently after receiving photos of a wartime journal kept by his great-grandfather's brother, which had been hiding in a local museum for decades. Number 8. The speeding train. A woman in India recently escaped a meeting with death after getting extremely lucky on a railway track. Apparently, she'd been trying to cross the track by stooping under the train. And that's obviously a horrible idea, and it turned into an absolute nightmare when the train started moving unexpectedly. Thinking quickly, the woman laid on the track and let the train drive over her. This was like something you'd expect to see happen in Red Dead Redemption. The woman literally laid between the tracks while the train drove over her body. And all while this was happening, bystanders were shouting at her to not move and stay completely still, though it's doubtful that all their shouting did much good. In the end, the woman walked away without any serious injuries. In fact, she wasn't injured at all. The train drove over her, and she walked away completely unscathed. Only hopefully next time she'll think twice before trying to take a shortcut underneath of a moving train. Number 7. The Cleveland Dam Disaster. In 1997, Wilson Williams was only 18 years old when he survived being almost completely destroyed by the Cleveland Dam. He'd been fishing at the nearby Capilano River when he heard the roar of the dam above. According to Williams himself, he knew that when he began hearing the thundering and roaring coming from above, he only had a couple of seconds to get to safety. By the time he ran out of the river and onto the shore, the water was already catching his legs. If he had just been a few seconds too late, the unexpected rush of water released from the dam would have likely knocked Williams off his feet and sent him tumbling through the river to his death. But Williams isn't the only one who's been lucky enough to survive an unexpected surge of water released from the dam. According to North Shore Search and Rescue, more than just a few people have needed to be rescued because of a sudden water fluctuation in the Capilano River caused by the Cleveland Dam. There have been fluctuations as dramatic as the water rising and falling over 10 feet in just a matter of seconds. That's basically like getting hit in the face by a tsunami. And if you're the unlucky fisherman on the riverbank who doesn't see it coming, you'll probably end up in a rather watery grave. Number 6. Runaway garbage. Speaking of tsunamis, a pedestrian was nearly taken out by a runaway tsunami of trash. when a garbage truck lost control and sped down a local Brazilian street in the city of Rio de Janeiro. The trash wave just narrowly missed a poor woman with some grocery bags before smashing headfirst into someone's car. It's still not exactly clear what happened to cause the garbage truck to go flying down the hill. The incident was captured thanks to security camera footage, and you can clearly see the shocked woman who was nearly run down with her grocery bags. She escaped death by no more than a single step. Had she been just a little slower, that garbage truck would have sent her to a rather stinky grave. Though there were definitely a handful of injuries because of the incident, though. According to the Daily Mail, at least one man suffered serious bruises and was taken to hospital. The driver of the garbage truck survived, though there was never any information on how he lost control of the vehicle. Considering how steep many of the streets are in Rio de Janeiro, it's no surprise this kind of thing happened. Some faulty brakes can turn any big truck into a speeding bulldozer of doom. What do you think caused the garbage truck to lose control? Let me know your thoughts below, and then don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 5. Escape from death row. In Indonesia, a Chinese drug trafficker sitting on death row recently escaped his punishment after digging a tunnel out of his cell and fleeing the prison. Sometimes I guess you have to make your own luck. And even if you're guilty of the crime you've been condemned for, you probably still don't want to die. This guy had been sentenced to death in 2017 for trafficking methamphetamine through Southeast Asia, and he somehow managed to carve a tunnel from his cell into the sewer system underneath the prison, thereby prolonging his life just a little bit longer. And according to the local Indonesian police chief, it was actually the criminal's second time escaping. This guy obviously didn't want to die, and apparently has some pretty good digging skills to help him out. Authorities discovered a crowbar, a screwdriver, a chisel, and a handful of other tools that the criminal likely stole while there'd been construction going on inside the prison kitchen. There's been no word yet if this guy has been recaptured, but it's safe to say he's hiding out in the forest somewhere. And believe it or not, prisoners running away from death row is actually fairly common in Indonesia, with Courthouse News reporting that at least 4 foreigners dug their way out of a jail in Bali in 2017 alone. Number 4. Attack of the Cobra. A reptile expert recently escaped death by cobra when a snake-catching expedition went horribly wrong. It must be kind of embarrassing to be a reptile expert and then almost be killed by the very reptile you're supposed to be an expert on. This incident happened in India when the reptile professional tried to catch a wild cobra. The man was standing on a fallen tree beside a river, trying to wrangle the snake with his equipment. Well, the snake wasn't very happy about it. The serpent tried to bite the man on the leg. He barely dodged the attack, and in a desperate attempt to save himself, the expert slapped the snake away and fell sideways off the tree. He hit the dirt. The snake lashed out at him again, and somehow he managed to grab the thing by the neck without being bitten. It was a real photo finish, but in the end, he got the snake secured and didn't suffer a single bite. And he's lucky that he didn't, as the venom from the cobra is enough to kill a grown man within hours without proper medical care. Number 3. Supermarket mayhem. In Russia, a young boy miraculously cheated death after a Toyota Land Cruiser drove straight through the wall of a local supermarket and almost ran him over. The boy was only 10 years old and had been pushing a shopping cart through the store when the car crashed, literally bursting through the wall and basically running the boy over. In the dramatic security footage, it looks like the car plowed through the boy hard enough to turn him into a pancake. But somehow, the kid ended up walking away from the incident without a single injury. He had been smacked by the front of the car so hard that he rolled under a shelf and all the way to safety. But the young boy wasn't the only lucky one in the situation. The checkout clerks also got away without being hurt, as the car crashed through the only checkout counter in the store that wasn't being attended. Everything lined up just perfectly so that nobody died, and everyone walked away completely fine, even though such a dramatic crash would normally result in at least a few serious injuries. As for the maniac who drove straight through the supermarket, he apparently refused to take an alcohol test after the crash, and he's now facing a criminal investigation. It's believed that he drove through the supermarket because he was wasted. Number 2. Chased by a bear. A group of skiers trying to enjoy the slopes got into a bit of trouble when a rampaging bear came speeding down the side of the mountain where they were skiing in central Romania and tried to eat them. This happened near the small town of Predil, and apparently the skiers had intruded into the bear's territory. The bear followed the group of skiers in what was a clear display of aggression, and everyone in the group was scared for their life, and you can't really blame them. The last thing anyone wants is for a giant bear to rip their face off. That's gotta be the absolute worst way to end a ski trip. Luckily, one of the skiers was smart enough to throw their backpack to distract the hungry animal, which allowed the skiers just enough time to get to safety. But while these skiers got away from the angry bear, the next group might not be so lucky. According to the local news reports, brown bears have a habit of chasing skiers near the Perdeel Mountain Resort, as a similar incident happened in January when a lone man was also chased down the mountainside by a large brown bear, narrowly escaping being mauled to death. Number 1. Death from above. A couple in Colorado escaped disaster when a huge chunk of debris from an airplane landed in their yard. Kirby Clements and his wife were both extremely unlucky and lucky at the same time when on a casual Saturday afternoon, they heard a loud and unexpected noise, only to witness a huge piece of metal sail past their window. It was extremely close to smashing through their roof, which would have meant a pretty uncomfortable death for both people. Nobody wants to be crushed by a loose piece of airplane smashing through their roof. Flight 328 had left Denver International Airport on its way to Hawaii, only to turn around and make an emergency landing because one of its engines failed. According to Fox 23 News, the mysterious object was a piece of airplane engine. It literally fell just in front of the couple's main window, crushing the bed of the truck in the driveway and creating a huge crater in the ground. The piece of metal was about 15 feet in diameter and heavy enough that if someone had been outside when it came raining down from above, they surely would have been crushed. Even after the huge piece of metal crashed into their yard, there were still pieces of insulating foam floating through the air like falling ash after a volcanic eruption for at least 4 or 5 minutes. According to the local police, nobody was hurt from any falling pieces of debris that day, though 2 houses and a handful of vehicles did sustain heavy damage. It's unclear whether the airline ever did compensate anyone for dropping parts of their aircraft into the unsuspecting neighborhood, but I sure hope so. Ray Connor was a fearless parkour enthusiast who made a careless mistake and ended up paying the ultimate price. He'd been working on the super yacht of a billionaire named Sir Jim Ratcliffe when the yacht docked near Genoa and Ray decided to do some parkouring. In the morning, he sent his sister a selfie showing him on the roof of a rather tall building near the Maritime Museum at the port. He was fearless about parkouring, loved climbing and running, and he thanked his skill and energy in part from his military training. Unfortunately, no matter how fearless you are, it's still pretty careless to jump around like a rabbit on top of a high building. Well, Ray never sent another selfie to his sister again. A patrol was sent to the building where Ray was last seen, but they didn't find him there. It wasn't until a few days later when an actual search team arrived at the building that they found his body. A simple mistake had caused Ray to fall through a plastic roof covering and drop 30 feet to the hard ground below. According to the post-mortem, he may not have even died right away, but he was definitely dead when the search party found him. Number 9. The careless selfie. 2 Iranian girls too busy having fun to have any fear of the consequences were recently rushed to hospital after taking a careless selfie while driving. The 2 women in Iran learned fear the hard way when they crashed their car in the middle of their selfie video. They'd been singing karaoke and thought it would be a smart idea to record themselves for a few seconds. Well, they uploaded the video online after the incident, and you can clearly see that neither of them were watching the road. You can even see the exact moment when they crashed and the camera turned off. In this case, the 2 careless girls survived, but they were extremely lucky. They even uploaded selfies from the hospital just to show everyone that they were still alive. And hopefully they won't be so negligent during their next car singing session. Number 8. The careless lion tamer. A lion tamer in Ukraine was recently mauled on camera by a lion that he was supposed to be taming. You obviously need to be pretty fearless to step into the ring with one of the biggest and most ferocious cats in the world. But just because you have no fear doesn't mean the lion's not going to attack you. The attack happened during a circus performance, and the video footage of the incident shows the exact moment when the lion bit down on the man's arm and forced him to the ground. The lion tamer told ABC News that even though he managed to fend the big lion off, its teeth remained stuck inside of his muscles. He ended up walking away with only a few bites and gashes and was extremely lucky the lion didn't kill him. If the big cat had gotten its teeth into the tamer's neck, it wouldn't have ended well at all. But here's the really crazy part. The lion tamer is definitely fearless as he's still working with the same lion and has admitted that it wasn't the cat's fault but his own. Carelessness is definitely something that should be avoided when taming lions. I don't think I would ever want to work with that lion anymore, but what about you? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 7. Living on the edge. Living on the edge was just a part of Wu Yongning's life. The guy called himself China's first rooftopper, and he was famous for his fearless stunts that he posted all over social media. He often climbed up extremely tall buildings to perform these stunts, with most of them leaving his body hanging off the edge. Wu regularly did gusty skyscraper acrobatics for his online fans and had people donating money to him depending on if they liked his stunt or not. But unfortunately, on November 8th, when Wu climbed to the top of Huanyuan International Center, fearlessness led to a careless mistake that saw him plunge 62 stories to his death. He was only 26 years old at the time and had been trying to do pull-ups on the edge of the building in central China with hopes the money from his fans would pay for his upcoming wedding. In the video that was uploaded, it's pretty obvious that Wu was having a hard time holding himself up. He was losing his grip and slipping, and finally he slipped a little too far and landed on the terrace below. And an unfortunate window cleaner stumbled upon his mangled body. Unfortunately, rooftopping is still a viral trend. Fearless maniacs all over the world are dangling off buildings and risking their own lives in extremely careless stunts. If you've been thinking about trying this, please don't. Number 6. The most fearless pilot. Chuck Yeager is one of the bravest and most fearless men who ever lived. He was a young military pilot and a confident flyer who was the first man on Earth to break the sound barrier at Mach 1. Chuck became the fastest man alive and went on to have a military career of almost 30 years. He started in the military as a non-commissioned officer. He survived getting shot down in an airplane, and in the Second World War, he battled as a fighter ace. This guy was one of the best test pilots in the world, and you have to be pretty careless with your own life to be a test pilot, as not all of them make it back alive. And to be honest, being careless is exactly how Chuck broke the sound barrier. He was flying the revolutionary X-1 rocket plane on October 14th of 1947. It was his 9th flight inside the rocket plane. Chuck was suffering from cracked ribs, the result of falling off his horse a few days before, but fearlessness, courage, determination, and definitely some carelessness helped Chuck to push past the horrifying turbulence that was going on inside the airplane and shatter straight through the previously impenetrable sound barrier. The first sonic boom in history could be heard all across the California desert as Chuck launched the world into a new era of aviation technology. He went on flying until his retirement in 2002, and then Chuck passed away in 2020 after a long and fulfilling life. Number 5. The man who bit back. In India, a man named Raj Kumar was drinking in his house when an extremely venomous snake invaded his home and bit him. Completely unprovoked, the snake slithered inside and sunk its venomous fangs straight into the unsuspecting man. Unfortunately for the snake, Raj turned out to be one fearless dude. After the snake bit him, he grabbed hold of the snake and started biting it back. Whether he really was fearless or just angry, it was definitely a weird reaction to the situation. He bit the snake repeatedly to the point that it was dead and mangled. Raj was then able to bring the dead snake to the hospital with him so that he could show the doctor his attacker. There was no information released on what kind of snake it was, but Raj was in serious condition and being transferred to another hospital because of its venom, suggesting it may have been an Indian cobra. And as for what kind of alcohol this guy was drinking to make him bite a venomous snake to death, well, we don't know about that either, and maybe that's for the best. Number 4. Base jumping mayhem. It takes some real guts to be a base jumper, and it also takes some real luck to survive a 180-foot fall after slamming into a cliff face during a base jumping incident gone horribly wrong. A man named Sam was caught in a huge gust of wind after jumping from a mountain peak 3,300 feet in the air. This happened in the Scottish Highlands, and the fearless base jumper ended up very much regretting his carelessness when he collided with a mountainside, causing his parachute to partially deflate. There was nothing stopping Sam from tumbling down the rock face of the cliff and landing on hard ground. And according to Sam himself, he's never heard of anyone falling 180 feet and surviving. And yet he did just that, coming away with only a few scratches and bruises. He wasn't even seriously injured. But here's a part about carelessness. Sam was trying to become the first person to jump off Lord Berkeley's seat on the Anti-Latch Mountain. And that, in and of itself, is fine. What's not fine is that Sam was very aware of the high winds. He knew it was too dangerous to jump, and he did it anyways. So let's just hope he thinks twice next time before jumping to what could be his death. Number 3. Fearless diver breaks protocol. A fearless diver recently got in some hot water after carelessly breaking protocol and getting attacked by a tiger shark. A group of 10 scuba divers were off the coast of South Africa when one of them made a grave error. The original plan was to dump some chum buckets and watch the sharks feed, and of course, there were safety protocols to follow. The group was supposed to act just like a school of fish by remaining together. This was supposed to prevent them from being eaten. However, one particularly careless diver broke the protocol, got separated, and was attacked by a 10-foot shark. It was very lucky that the shark didn't bite any major arteries, as that would have meant certain death for the diver. Instead, the diver only suffered minor injuries and a huge blow to his ego. But he did manage to escape the situation with all his limbs intact. Number 2. The fearless tourist. A group of tourists in the African nation of Ghana recently ran into some trouble when a careless photo shoot with a hungry crocodile went wrong. What a big shock. Anyone who looks at a crocodile and doesn't immediately feel fear and instead feels an inclination to take a selfie with it, well, they may not have a very long life in front of them. A group of tourists were at a crocodile pond posing for the photo when the crocodile lashed out and tried to eat one of the tourists. According to the local reports, the tour guide had failed to give the crocodile a chicken to eat before the tourists tried to take their pictures, and that meant the croc was especially hungry. Funnily enough, when the crocodile attacked the tourists, all of her friends ran away screaming. The woman was bitten on her side. She suffered minor injuries from the crocodile's deadly teeth, but she did make a full recovery. And this should be a lesson to all tourists. There's nothing wrong with being fearless, but some animals should definitely be met with more caution than others. Number 1. The luckiest window cleaner. Alcides Moreno told news reporters that he loved to clean windows. He loved the soap, the water, the squeegee, and going up and down tall buildings like Spider-Man. However, his job turned deadly when he fell 47 stories from the roof of a New York skyscraper. I mean, it definitely takes a fearless kind of person to be a window cleaner for skyscrapers, or to be an air conditioning repairman working hundreds of feet above the sidewalks. But walking on the roof of such a tall skyscraper is a next-level kind of fearless. Moreno and his brother took the elevator to the roof of the Solo Tower in Manhattan's Upper East Side first thing in the morning. Their plan was to clean all the windows of the 47-floor luxury tower. Unfortunately, when the brothers climbed into the washing platform, the cables holding it steady slipped from their position, and Moreno fell all the way to the bottom. This careless error caused both him and his brother to plummet about 472 feet into a narrow alleyway. The BBC reported that they would have been traveling at a speed of about 120 miles per hour straight to the ground. Alcides' brother landed on a wooden fence and his body was severed in half. Alcides, on the other hand, landed in a pile of twisted metal and miraculously survived. Alcides was rushed to the hospital and put into a coma. He sustained injuries to his spinal column, his brain, and he had fractured his ribs, his arms, and his legs. He had to receive 24 pints of blood because he had lost so much of it. But in the end, this fearless window cleaner survived. But unfortunately, his brother wasn't so lucky. Kirsty Amberg looks normal enough on the outside, but she's actually one of the biggest drug lords in all of Europe and is currently wanted by Europol. Amberg, who is a native of Estonia, was originally sentenced in 2018 to a year and 9 months in prison for trafficking massive quantities of drugs that she acquired through a complex network of criminals. However, her sentence was suspended under a special condition that Amberg was not to commit another crime for at least 3 years and meet with her probation officer regularly. There were some other stipulations too, and in the end, Amberg wound up breaking the rules. She was then declared a fugitive and has been on the run ever since. Her whereabouts are unknown, and she's still one of the most wanted women in Europe. She doesn't have a violent past, but she could be unpredictable and dangerous. Number 9. Elena Puziarovich. Elena Puziarovich was one of the most savage human traffickers in all of Europe. Elena worked in Spain as a procurer of women. She was in charge of capturing young Russian women and then bringing them illegally into Spain. She would collect them at the airport and then take them to the hostess club where she worked, where they would then be forced into prostitution. Many of these girls were deceived about the type of work they would be doing in Spain and were unwittingly turned into modern slaves, all thanks to Elena. There was even one incident in which a girl tricked by Elena into prostitution jumped out of a window just to escape. Her dangerous stunt left her in the hospital, but at least she was able to make it back to her country. In the case of Elena, she ended up being caught and sentenced to 5 years in prison for the illegal detention of another human, 2.5 years in prison for determination to prostitution, and another 5 years for crimes against the rights of foreign citizens. Won't be getting out of prison anytime soon. Number 8. Adelet Shakurgazieva. Europol recently added Adelet Shakurgazieva to their list of most wanted women in Europe. Adelet had been the only female member of a gang of burglars who had committed home robberies between 2014 and 2015. As a native of Kyrgyzstan, Adelet had participated in a total of 28 alleged thefts from residents of Slima in the country of Malta. Her and her gang allegedly broke into people's homes and stole money and jewelry. Adelet was arrested in 2015 and then granted bail in 2017, after the other members of the gang pleaded not guilty to charges of organized crime and forming a criminal organization. However, Adelet vanished after she was granted bail and has not been seen since. It's believed that she fled the country, and according to Europol, she is now one of the 16 most wanted women in Europe. But check out the details on the robberies themselves. The gang had been robbing apartments using specialized bump keys to pin locks and then steal only cash, gold, and jewelry. They would never take any electronics. And according to the police, Adelet and her gang of thieves would leave behind their signature, which was to take the homeowner's socks and place them in random locations in the house. It's weird, but 100% true. Have you or anyone you know ever had their house burglarized? Must be scary. Let me know in the comments below, and then don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button for more videos like this one. Number 7. Jessica EDOSOMWAN. Jessica EDOSOMWAN is currently one of the most wanted women in Europe, and is specifically wanted by the French judicial authorities in relation to an international case of human trafficking and a money laundering operation. Jessica is an alleged member of a criminal organization operating out of Nigeria and responsible for human trafficking throughout every major city in France. Jessica was one of 24 people who were put on trial a few years ago as part of a crackdown on the sex trafficking ring. The organization members were accused of recruiting girls from small towns in Nigeria, transporting them to France, and then forcing them into a life of prostitution. The young women were promised that they would get to travel through Western Europe for free, but it was just a horrible lie. These poor girls would be kept in the worst conditions imaginable, and all the money they made would be kept by their captors. Prosecutors in the case estimated that the criminals made around $150,000 a month from their victims, who were aged between 17 and 38, and would sell their bodies for as little as $10. Jessica is considered to be the mama of the operation, and unfortunately justice has yet to be served, as she's still on the run today. She's been running since 2017, and could be hiding out in France, Germany, or even Belgium. She should be considered extremely dangerous. Number 6. Julianne Dimitrian. Julianne Dimitrian is one of the most wanted females in Hawaii, currently wanted by the FBI for some of the most white-collar crimes you can imagine. She was first inducted with her husband back in 2009 for mortgage fraud. Julianne and her husband even pled guilty to operating a heinous scheme in which they used their charming and fake influence to convince frightened homeowners to give up their houses in a bid to improve their financial situation. But instead of helping the people who were in trouble, Julianne and her husband used the money from the victims' homes to fund their own extravagant lifestyle. As a direct result of this mortgage fraud, many families and desperate individuals in Hawaii ended up losing their homes. Both Julianne and her husband were supposed to appear in court to be sentenced in 2010, but instead ran away and have not been seen since. According to the official FBI website, there is currently a $10,000 reward for any information that leads to the arrest of Julianne or her husband John. Number 5. Joanne Chesimard. In 1973, Joanne Chesimard was part of the Black Liberation Army when she murdered a police officer named Werner Forrester execution style off the New Jersey Turnpike. She was arrested for the murder and sentenced to spend the rest of her life in prison. However, on November 2, 1979, she somehow managed to escape from prison in New Jersey and has not been seen since. It's believed that she may have sought asylum in Cuba back in the 80s and could still be there today, living a life of fun in the sun when she's supposed to be in jail forever for killing a cop. If she really is in Cuba, chances are she's never going to be apprehended, regardless of the $1 million reward offered by the FBI. Number 4. NAZIRA Maria Cross. NAZIRA Maria Cross was accused of poisoning her husband back in 2008. Her currently dead husband, Mike Cross, had apparently discovered that NAZIRA was embezzling funds from their business into her own personal account. Instead of coming clean to her spouse, she decided to poison him because of it. According to investigators, she poisoned Mike at their home and then buried his body in a shallow grave near a ranch in Nevada. She had also apparently been having an affair with her insurance agent while pretending to have terminal cancer. She also faked her death before poisoning her husband. She's been described as a black widow, an extremely dangerous person. After her husband's murder, NAZIRA was questioned by the police, but soon after she fled the country and wasn't seen again until her arrest in Peru in 2014. NAZIRA Cross was a Costa Rican national and probably thought she would get by undetected in the South American country. But that's not at all what happened. The Peruvian National Police arrested her in her home after 6 long years on the run. She was then put in jail while she awaited extradition back to the United States to be tried for the brutal murder of her husband. Number 3. Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell has been labeled the most wanted woman in the world. And if you're not sure who this is, Ghislaine Maxwell has been accused of recruiting sex slaves for the infamous Jeffrey Epstein. She's actually the daughter of a media tycoon named Robert Maxwell and allegedly played a pivotal role in finding underage victims to bring to Epstein's island. Unfortunately, after denying all of the allegations, Maxwell has not been seen. According to Senior News, the last time she was witnessed in public was at a burger restaurant in Los Angeles just a few days after Jeffrey Epstein died. Since his death, she's become a ghost. Sources close to Maxwell have said that she will probably never be seen again, which means that if she is guilty of crimes, she's probably going to end up getting away with them. There are some British tabloids that want information about her so badly that they've even offered thousands and thousands of dollars in reward money. The Sun has offered £10,000 to anyone who could provide information on Maxwell's whereabouts or any leads to making contact with her. A longtime friend and an ex-girlfriend of Prince Andrew said it's highly unlikely she will ever be found. Now, it's important to note that Ghislaine Maxwell has never actually been charged with an official crime and isn't technically wanted by law enforcement agencies. However, she has been accused by victims of Jeffrey Epstein as being directly involved in turning them into slaves for wealthy billionaires and members of royal families. One such victim, Virginia Roberts, spoke out that Maxwell trained her to do unspeakable things at the behest of Epstein and his associates. Number 2. Hayat Boumediene. For a long time, Hayat Boumediene was the most wanted woman in France. Her husband was responsible for killing 5 people as part of the Charlie Hebdo attack in 2015. She was a member of ISIS and was sentenced to 30 years in jail in 2020 on charges of terrorism. She was one of 14 people found guilty in relation to both the Charlie Hebdo attack and the attack on the Jewish supermarket in 2015 as well. But here's the catch. Hayat is not in France. She actually fled the country before the attacks to join ISIS and is believed to still be in Syria. According to the Daily Mail, some sources place her currently as being inside a prison camp in the north of Syria, but her absence hasn't stopped France from charging her with the crimes. If they ever get her back into the country, she will be immediately taken to jail. And she would then have to serve 30 years in a high-security cell, which is polite talk for solitary confinement. She would literally be stuffed into a cell and left to go insane for the next 30 years. And I can't say she doesn't 100% deserve it either, but of course they do have to get her back into France first. Number 1. Enadina Arellano Felix. Enadina Arellano Felix was the first female drug lord of a Mexican cartel. She seized control of the Tijuana cartel back in the early 2000s, but she wasn't just a ruthless nobody with a gangster background like you might expect. She actually graduated from the University of Guadalajara and is an extremely educated woman. She quickly earned the nickname La Jefe, which in Spanish means the boss. In the early 2000s, many of the male leaders of the Tijuana cartel were arrested or shot dead, and Enadina proved to be a valuable asset to the criminal family business. She actually operated the gang as its leader for much of her adult life. She was responsible for successfully laundering millions of dollars through businesses and helped restore order after a violent turf war in 2008. She even allegedly made an alliance with the infamous Chapo Guzman, or El Chapo. Technically speaking, she's not officially wanted. Her exact involvement with the Tijuana cartel is not officially known, and there's no public database showing any crimes committed by her. She was definitely the leader of the cartel, she just never came into any legal trouble for it. But in any case, with the rise of the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel in recent years, the Tijuana cartel has lost much of its relevance. What exactly Enadina is up to now is really anybody's guess, though there are several sources who claim she could still be running whatever's left of the criminal organization behind the trafficking of cocaine, marijuana, and heroin into the United States. Robbing a bank is a pretty dumb idea. Even more dumb is leaving behind your state ID after asking for the money. This ridiculous and foolish crime went down when an armed bank robber named Edner Flores walked into a Chicago bank and demanded $10,000 in cash. He strolled through the bank doors just before noon on a Monday, dressed in a hoodie and a baseball cap. And of course, a surgical mask because of COVID-19. When Flores got to the teller, he handed her a deposit ticket with the note that said the day's date, the amount he wanted given to him, and the word armed, suggesting he had a gun on him. At this point, the teller realized she was being robbed, and she activated the silent alarm and asked the robber if he wanted to make a withdrawal. The teller then asked him to give her either an ATM card or an ID card so that she could hand over the money. The robber then stupidly gave the woman his ID, identifying himself for future evidence. But in the end, it didn't even matter. Within just a couple minutes, police walked into the bank, stood directly behind the bank robber, who had still been waiting for his money, and they arrested him right there. It turned out that Edner Flores was a pretty lousy crook. Number 9. The supermarket bandit. In Spain, a senseless dummy decided they were gonna rob a couple of supermarkets. As if robbing one supermarket wasn't stupid enough, this guy thought he would hit a whole chain of them. He robbed 2 local supermarkets in Fuengirola, about 30 minutes apart. During the robberies, he flashed his knife and demanded that the cashiers hand him the contents of their registers. The police were quick to act. They saw the man on captured security footage and went to hunt him down. While driving down the street, police saw someone who looked just like the robber in the video. They pulled up to him with their patrol car, and before the police could even question him, he blurted out, "Officers, I haven't robbed any supermarkets." This was obviously a dead giveaway, seeing as the cops hadn't even asked him if he had been robbing supermarkets. The guy gave himself up like a chump, and the police then found 2 knives hidden inside of his clothes that had been used to rob the supermarkets. That's case closed. Number 8. The selfie burglar. A man named Ashley Keese decided that he was going to burglarize somebody's house. This is a very rude thing to do, and it's one of the dumbest crimes that a person can commit. But Ashley took the stupidity to an unrealistic level. While in the middle of burglarizing the victim's house, this guy took a selfie of himself in the mirror with a stolen SIM card. He then sent the picture of himself in the houses he was stealing from to the colleagues of the house's owner. Of course, one of the victim's friends was suspicious and called the police, and they arrested Ashley at his house the day following the burglary. And at this point, you're probably wondering why he would send those photos to someone who was clearly going to snitch on him. Well, here's the deal. A spokesperson from the South Yorkshire Police said that Ashley had taken the selfie and then posted it onto his WhatsApp. But because he had used a SIM card that he stole from the property, the picture was somehow seen by all the work colleagues of the victim. It was a complete disaster for this stupid criminal who otherwise may have made off with around $30,000 in goods, including an Audi A4. On a scale of 1 to 10, how dumb was that guy? Let me know in the comments, and then don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 7. Foiled by autolock. In Johannesburg, a rather daft criminal was foiled while trying to steal a car because of its autolock function. Nobody has ever claimed that car thieves are smart. It doesn't take a genius to jiggle a lock and start an engine. The car's owner went to take care of some business and left the car parked outside. And even though the criminal in this case was clever enough to use a jamming device to access the car, he didn't have the foresight to think that maybe the new BMW 3 Series had some tricks of its own. The criminal got into the car, closed the door, and then couldn't get the car moving. He tried to bail but found that the auto-lock features had trapped him and he couldn't get out. The guy ended up sitting inside of the car for over an hour and a half before he was finally let out by the car's owner and the police who had arrived on the scene. And of course, pedestrians had figured out what was going on and crowded around the car to point and laugh. Number 6. Evidence left behind. A very foolish armed robber decided to hit a gambling den. but was subsequently caught by police after he made the incredibly dumb decision of leaving his resume at the scene of the crime. The 26-year-old man robbed the Paddy store in Birmingham in the UK, wearing a hood and a mask. He pulled out a gun and demanded cash, and everything might have gone smoothly except for the fact that he had previously dropped off a resume with the manager. The security footage of him leaving the store without his mask on linked him to the resume, and police caught him pretty soon after. They even had his phone number and home address, and that must have really sucked for the robber, who had managed to get around $21,000 in cash from the safe. If not for his resume, he may have gotten away with it. Number 5. Dumb bank robbers. John Mogan II has been labeled the world's dumbest criminal. This evil, not-so-much genius robbed the savings bank in Pickaway County and then proceeded to post pictures of himself holding up the loot he had stolen from the bank all over Facebook. After posting evidence of his heist, he ended up getting arrested and being sent to prison. He was sentenced to 3 years by Judge P. Randall Neese in order to pay back the $6,430 he had stolen. Oh yeah, and his driver was also sentenced to prison. His girlfriend had driven the getaway vehicle, and she too was captured and then charged with complicity in the theft. She only had to serve 2 years, but she also had to help her criminal boyfriend repay the money. And to make matters even worse for John and his girlfriend, he was already well known to the authorities in the area and was easily recognizable because he had some very specific tattoos all over his face and neck. Posting the pictures online of his face, his tattoos, and his stack of cash was arguably the stupidest thing he could have possibly done, aside from robbing the bank in the first place. Number 4. Fair warning. In Connecticut, 2 bank robbers tried to pull off the most unsuccessful heist in history. They were probably thinking that they were pulling some Ocean's 11 type stuff, but they were really just dumb. The wannabe bank robbers phoned the People's Bank in Fairfield and gave them a warning that they would be coming and that they wanted $100,000 in large bills ready. Otherwise, there would be a bloodbath. Obviously, the bank employee who had answered the phone hung up and then immediately called 911. The bank then, of course, initiated a lockdown, and police quickly arrived at the scene to wait for the robbers. Detective Lieutenant Michael Gagne of the Fairfield, Connecticut Police Department said, "I've heard of drive-up robberies where they rob the bank via drive-up windows, but I've never had somebody call ahead and say, 'Get the money, we're coming.'" But things get even dumber. At the same time that the one bank robber was on the phone, his accomplice was inside the bank waiting. He was planning to wait until they had gathered the money, at which point he would pick it up and leave. Of course, it really didn't work out that way. After the accomplice approached the teller, he handed her a note asking for the same amount of money that was requested in the call. Gagne said after passing the note and collecting only $900, the suspect kindly asked to be let out of the bank. By this time, patrol cars had already arrived at the scene. The suspect walked out of the bank, tried to run to the car that was waiting for him, and both were immediately arrested and charged with first-degree robbery and threatening in the first degree. Gagne added in his statement that the robbers insisted that the money they were picking up not be put in a dye pack. Their wishes were obviously not followed, and the bag of cash exploded in dye when one of the suspects threw it on the ground. Gagne said, "We were all kind of cracking up with the call ahead aspect of it. Definitely unusual technique." Number 3. Lost weapon. Imagine being such a poorly skilled robber that you throw your gun at the person you're trying to rob. This is exactly what happened in Colorado when a robber wearing a cap and sunglasses entered an e-cigarette store in Aurora, pulled out his gun, and tried to point it at the lady behind the counter, only to drop his weapon right in her hands. The robber tried to grab it back, but it was too late. He had no choice but to flee back out the front door. But he was so poorly prepared that he didn't even seem to have a belt on, and his pants kept falling down as he tried to escape. It was the most embarrassing robbery ever captured on video, and the footage was even released to the public by the Aurora Police Department, who at the time of the report were still trying to find the worst robber in all of Colorado. Number 2. Hanging by a ledge. A burglar in China is really not the sharpest tool in the shed. He got into some seriously hot water after failing to break into an apartment building. Nobody's quite sure what was going on inside this guy's head, but he scaled the side of an apartment block, thinking he could squeeze himself through one of the open windows. This guy was really trying to do some Spider-Man-style burglaries, but in the end, he couldn't fit through the windows, and he got stuck with half his body dangling 5 stories above the concrete. He had to hang there and wait completely helpless until fire rescue showed up to get him free. He was so stuck that it took rescue workers at least 30 minutes to pull him onto the building. at which time he was immediately handed off to the police, though unfortunately we don't know what charges were ever laid against him. Number 1. The Topless Crook. A shirtless young man named Terry Leach was recently arrested for an insanely stupid crime. This topless guy was caught on camera in the middle of the afternoon trying to throw a parcel full of drugs over a prison wall. He had a stash of about $2,000 worth of ecstasy, marijuana, steroids, and other miscellaneous items, and he was caught red-handed trying to fling them over the outer wall of a prison in the UK. And he was spotted almost immediately by an officer watching the live security footage. He could be seen looking around suspiciously, hiding in bushes, and trying to get his bag of drugs over the wall and into the courtyard beyond. Of course, this only went on for a few minutes before officers went outside and arrested him. And to be quite honest, he was probably on the very drugs that he was trying to throw into the prison. After all, there is no other logical reason for getting half naked and trying to throw something over a prison wall. I mean, at least do it at night. According to the report from MSN, Terry had also been part of a gang that trafficked illegal goods into prisons and jails using drones. The gang would use a drone to either drop illegal substances somewhere into the prison, or they would fly the drone directly up to the inmate's window and drop off the goods personally, like an illegal delivery service. Thanks for watching. Which of these burglaries deserve the award for dumbest criminal ever? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for all the latest videos from the channel.